Okay, so the first question that was asked was, our architect designed our home with a lot of windows on southern and western elevations without any consideration for shading. This summer was very hot and our internal temperatures reached 29 degrees at the time. We've considered retrofitting brise soleil, etc. What could you advise? Over to you, Luke. And if you want to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, it's all right. Yeah, thanks for joining everyone. So yeah, I'm Luke Gilman. I'm the Windows Department Manager here at 21 Degrees, formerly the Green Building Store, which you may have known our previous name. We did these webinars a few years ago, maybe like 3, 4 years ago, and they were really popular. And then I think COVID hit and things just got in the way and we stopped doing them. We're just thinking about bringing them back. Thought we'd try one. So your feedback afterwards would be really helpful. Hopefully we'll have some good conversations and help some projects. So yeah, the question that got sent in about overheating, which is a really key thing at the moment. And I think brise soleil is a good solution. Obviously that allows for...
You can see the first slide, Luke.
That's it. It's working
Yeah,
now.
there we go. That's done.
Yeah, so there's a brise soleil slide here. So as you can see, the high summer sun is blocked out when the trees are in bloom. And then in the winter, when the trees have lost their leaves, it allows the sun to come through. So it is a good solution. There's different ways of doing it, not just planting trees. Obviously, they can be plants or pergolas and stuff. So it is a solution. There's actually a lot of solutions when it comes to shading, as you can see on this slide here that I've taken from a different presentation. There's actually 19 options here, so quite a lot of different ways of shading. A lot of these use a lot more in Europe, where they're kind of a bit ahead of us and stuff like this. And this second slide has got a performance web. So of those 19 solutions, it's actually telling you which ones are the best and what they're good at and what they're not so good at. And this kind of points towards external Venetian blinds or external roller blinds, which are becoming a lot more popular in the UK. It's something that 21 Degrees are starting to provide. We found a supplier and we're starting to bring these into our offering. Venetian blinds can be retracted, they can tilt, so they can sort of let in light, so you can tilt them to the angle that you want. You can raise them up and down, stop them halfway. So they are quite a good solution. They can be buried within the fabric if designed in early enough. So quite a good solution. Roller blinds, similar, although they're either up or down or kind of halfway. But with a roller blind with certain fabrics, you can get good visibility out of them. You do get privacy and obviously blocking out the solar. So I feel like shading is going to become a much bigger thing. And I imagine a lot of you guys are starting to see that on your projects and starting to think about it. Obviously, if you're building passive house, the best way would be to actually design out the overheating. So whether it's overhanging roofs or trees and stuff, but I think it's something that we need to be aware of. Hopefully for that client or architect to ask that question, there's a few options here. And if they want to talk about external blinds and roller blinds, then we can have a separate conversation.
Does anybody that is on the webinar now have a question? You can either raise your hand and we can unmute you or pop it in the Q&A box. And if not, then I'll get on to the next question that was sent in. Put it onto the next question and then obviously just feel free to raise your hand at any point. So the next question was, I'm carrying out a deep retrofit of an existing property and using 200 mil of external wall insulation. I've seen a few different details for holding windows in the insulation zone. What do you think is best?
Right, okay. Yeah, that's a good question and one that comes up quite a lot. 21 Degrees, we work on a lot of projects that are doing external wall insulation, and different amounts of external wall insulation can often, the depth of that insulation can affect the position of the window and the best way to hold it. For 200 mil of insulation, the system that we've found best is this one where we use a compact foam block, structural insulated block, which we supply. That is fixed into the outer skin of the wall, and that's where the window will sit. And then the window is held head and sides with angle brackets, just simple angle brackets that you can get from Screwfix or wherever. We find that this is the simplest way. If you've got a really heavy window, you might need to support the compact foam a little bit further down. If the brickwork isn't in great condition, you've got to be thinking about that peeling away the sort of compact foam in the window. But yeah, we found this a really good solution. If you were doing less than 200 mil of EWI and you couldn't have the window sat quite as far out, we found just sitting the window half and half, so half on the brickwork, so it's got the support, and then strapped back to the inner skins is a really good detail as well. In some of our cavity wall passive houses that we did, where we were sitting the window in the middle of a 300 mil cavity, So slightly different, but same way that you need to support the window in the insulation zone. We've used plywood boxes, so creating a four-sided plywood box that holds the window into the insulation zone. That can be a really good way of doing it as well. But yeah, I think the key thing is just making sure you've had that checked by a structural engineer for the weight, really, and then making sure it's weatherproof. So if you're doing external wall insulation, quite often if you're fitting the window outside of the wall, it can be left exposed, especially if you're doing this in kind of the worst months of the year, autumn, winter, into the sort of early parts of spring. There can be a lot of rain, and windows are designed to shed water from the face of the window. If water's getting in on top or even to the inside, it's getting to the wrong part of the window. So our guys designed this simple kind of canopy solution that you can see on the middle image. It's just a bit of DPM, basically creating a hood over the window to protect the head and the inside of the window. And that can be removed once the insulation work starts, but just keeps that window protected. And then we tape down the sides just using weatherproof tapes back against the masonry, waiting for the EWI. So we've found this a really good system. We've done this quite a lot now. It allows installation to be quite quick. Great solution all around, really.
Thank you. Still no raised hands or Q&As in the box, so we'll carry on with the ones that were previously asked. From your experience, what are the most common issues with a window and door order or the installation?
Okay, I think one of the biggest problems that we come across is with self-builders who are great, but quite often they don't go to that next level with the architects. We're going to REBA Stage 4, where you're getting that detailed design, and having so many options for windows and doors, not having those detailed drawings created prior to an order is what tends to lead to problems. Having inward opening, outward opening windows on the same order, fixed screens, lift and slides, entrance doors, inward and outward doors, all work a little bit different and have different frame profiles. So if you're bringing in different insulations on the inside, different thicknesses, you've got different wall finishes on the outside, render, timber cladding, masonry. If you haven't thought about how that window interacts with the opening and the finishes, that can lead to issues. One of the most common ones we come across is floor heights. People maybe building new build, ordering off drawings for door heights and not considering the different types of door, different types of threshold, how that works with the floor finishes. We try and avoid it by asking the right questions from our own point of view to make sure the order's right, but not having those detailed drawings just creates problems that could be avoided just by having those drawings drawn up so you can see the actual section of the window that you're buying or the door and how that meets with the different wall builds up and floor build-ups. I think something else that we see, which is a common problem, is on the installation side. So I think not thinking about the on-site logistics and how such big frames are going to get into position, really. I think windows and doors are getting much bigger. People are going for big, huge sliding doors, even at first floor, big screens. And, our guys used to get to site and would be ready to fit, and scaffolding would be blocking the openings. There'd be no actual way into the building with the items. We've kind of got around that now, so we do a pre-installation site visit, which we find it adds a bit of cost or a bit, it's a bit of something that comes out of our pocket, I suppose, but it really helps those situations. So we can go meet the contractors and say, look, think about this. We've got this 5 meter sliding door and your scaffolding's blocking all the openings. But I think planning ahead for stuff like that really makes a difference and allows every trade to get on with the jobs and not have that wasted time with 4 or 5 men stood around, not being able to get on with the job.
Right. Next question. How does the design of a window affect the U value?
Okay, so yeah, I've got a slide for this because it's a slide that I show at exhibitions when I do a presentation or I meet clients. And I think this slide really helps explain how a U value can change depending on how the window is designed. So in terms of marketing U values, we always size that on a window that's 1230 wide by 1480 high. And that gives you the U value that you'll see on companies' websites or literature. So these U values are based on our GBS 78 triple glaze range, which is our kind of starting triple glaze range. And you can see the second image there is a single opening window, 0.82 U value. And we've put some prices against these because I think it's also significant how the price changes. So if we change that to the left, it went to a fixed window. You can see the price comes down, the U value comes down, so you've got a better U value because you've got more glass. Skipping across the third image, we've added 2 sashes into this now. So we've got a transom and a panes of glass. The price is going up, the U value is going up. So you can see actually you're making the window perform worse and you're paying more for that. Go right across to the right-hand side and glazing bars, which was a key feature in times gone by, mainly because they couldn't make glass units as big as we can now. Adding those glazing bars is, again, it's making the U value much worse. The price is jumping right up because you've got stick-on bars, you've got duplex spaces between the glass, and still the two openers. So that's kind of a design that we're quite used to seeing in the UK. But as you can see, that's making a triple glazed window 1.1 U value. If that was double glazed, it'd probably be getting towards 2 U value, which is beyond building regs, so not even acceptable. So you can really start to see how the design of the window really affects things. Another key thing when it comes to U values is thinking about the position of the window within the wall, because you can actually get a really high performance window, 0.82 U value. And if you put that in the wrong place within the wall, then the UW installed, which is the U value installed, which is a metric used in passive house but not used in building regs, actually can mean that you can get a really good window, put it in the wrong place, and then the window installed value can be almost double what it is. So that's when you start to get mold and condensation problems because you've not put the window in the insulation zone. And if you don't make it airtight with tapes and good sealing, you can really go wrong. So I think the design of the window is really important. Trying to minimize the divisions in the design of the window, single openers if you can, up to a certain size. But then, yeah, actually where you put the window within the wall is really important as well.
Right, I think you've also kind of covered this next question in what you've just said, but let's see if there's anything else you want to add. Can you suggest any cost-saving tips for window and door design?
Yes, I mean, obviously simplifying the design is probably the best way. Another simple thing that I often say to architects or self-builders is just getting those windows above 800 mil from the floor. Any glazing below 800 mil from the floor, you need toughened glass. If that's at ground floor, you've probably got to have safety glass both sides, which can add up to 40% sometimes. If that's at first floor, you've got to toughen the inside. So again, still an uplift, maybe 20%. So where you can, it's probably quite standard anyway, but sometimes we do see windows set at like 700, which then brings that glazing into the critical zone. Keeping windows above 800 is a really good, simple way. Again, simplifying it, so either one or two panes of glass. Do you need a window that splits to so many different sections? How many openers you have in a window? So again, if you're building passive house or towards passive house, you're going to be having MVHR, you're going to be needing that kind of house to be sealed. So you're not going to need to be opening windows that much because you're going to be having fresh air coming. So I think just thinking about, one opener per room or just the minimum that you need to meet building regs for purge venting, but just thinking about how you'll use the house once you've got MVHR, which can be a little bit tricky if you've come from a house where you're opening windows a lot to get fresh air in, but that can be sometimes why going to something like a passive house open day can be really good and actually feeling what it's like in a passive house. And I think the third thing I'd probably say is the large opening doors. So I think everyone's building a nice big self-build wants a huge sliding door, which I think is fine. But if you're getting to a point where your budget's getting pushed beyond your budget, it's thinking about how you could change that sliding door, but not lose too much of the functionality. So if you had a double door with side lights, when those double doors are open, they can swing right back against the side lights. So you get a clear opening in the middle there, which is as big a clear opening as a sliding door. But a double door and side lights is probably half the price of a sliding door. So straight away, if you've got more than one sliding door on a project and one of them could perhaps change to double door and side lights, that can be a good way to save some money. Obviously, you've got to balance the aesthetics, so you're going to have extra mullions in there and a slight hit on the U value, but a significant cost saving. We quite often see people with really small sliding doors, kind of 2 meters, 2.5 meters. So only half of that is sliding, and it's quite an expensive solution for a small space. So in that instance, we'd say, why not have a single door hinged on the mullion? So again, that door can hinge back, fold against the side light. You get the same clear opening as you do with a sliding door, but again, it's probably half the price, if not even less. And we do find that sliding doors slide better when they're more of a square shape in terms of the sliding section. When you've got a rectangle, if you imagine pulling a rectangle along a track, it can sometimes judder a little bit. So yeah, sliding doors do work better when they're kind of 1.5 to 2 meters per section. I think that's the kind of key advice there for cost saving.
Next question is, what is your opinion on sliding doors versus bifolds?
Okay. Yeah, so sliding doors are definitely getting more popular or have been more popular over the last 5 years, I'd say. I think that probably stems from people having bifolds in existing houses and seeing the problems with them. And I think a lot of the problems with bifold is just down to lack of maintenance and looking after them. If you've got a bifold door, you've got a lot more components, a lot more hinges, a lot more, I suppose, things to go wrong. And quite often they were made of plastic or maybe aluminium or stuff, which will expand and contract in the weather. And all those things kind of lead to it not working very well, gaskets perishing from not being cleaned or being dragged in the tracks. So all them things, I think, give them bifolds quite a bad name. Sliding doors, obviously it's just one door sliding behind a fixed unit usually. So there's only one kind of key junction there for stuff like air tightness and weather tightness. So it tends to be less to go wrong, I suppose. I think also with the lift and slide door, you've got the mullion down the center and the fixed unit to one side. If you get any deflection in the head of the opening, it's usually kind of transferred into that fixed unit. So it kind of takes a bit of the problem away. If you've got a bifold door and the steel above it deflects and the doors are open or there's no real support in there, again, you can get problems there because that deflection passes onto the head rail of the bifold, which then causes problems. We do a bifold from Lacuna, who are a specialist Danish company, and they use heat-treated timber, which really takes away all the kind of expansion and swelling and problems that used to come with bifold doors. They've got a really good product. They've got really good fixing systems. Everything comes from them with a pre-drilled hole for exactly where you should fix it, which holds the weight of the door, which means you're not going to get any sagging. They've also got adjustable fixings in the head, so if there is any deflection after time, you can basically screw the head back up a little bit. And I think when it comes to fixing large items like that, having something in the head of the door, which isn't something rigid like certain expanding foams, which set really hard, because then if you do try and fix it, you've got nowhere for that head to go. But if you fill that with something like an Ilbrook expanding foam, which is much softer, or even insulation in there rather than expanding foam, if you do need to screw that head in afterwards, you can do, and that'll be much better. So I think in general, I think lift and slides is less to go wrong. But I think if you are going to bifold, find a decent bifold that's, meets all the attributes and uses stable timber if it's a timber one.
Brilliant. Just a quick thing to say, if you do want to ask a question, either please do pop your hand up or put it in the Q&A box and we will answer it. I think we've got about 4 or 5 that are left that people have pre-sent in. So obviously if we've answered your questions already, then great. Hopefully it's over the next couple of questions. So the next one, Luke, my clients are retiring and don't want any maintenance. Which window material do you suggest for them?
Okay, yeah, this is a question that we get a lot, especially at exhibitions when we meet lots of clients and there's lots of different window manufacturers around. And quite often we get clients who have just bounced off a uPVC stand or something coming over and saying, I can't buy timber because it's going to rot, it's going to have to be painted every 2 years. We've been supplying timber windows for 25 years and we still promote that massively. Timber's obviously sustainable, it's not going to go to landfill afterwards. And it now comes with microporous paints, which are really good. They allow the timber to breathe. They're flexible paints, so they don't crack and blister like old paints used to do. A lot of people who've grown up with timber windows with problems, those timber windows have probably been in for a very long time. So they've actually done really well, which I think sometimes we forget about when we're looking at old timber windows in properties. They've probably been made out of solid timber rather than laminated and finger jointed timber. So movement was a lot more freer. And the paint systems they were using would often crack and split. Water would get in behind the paint, get trapped in behind there because it can't then get back out. And that's where you see the bottom rail of timber windows rotting. In terms of maintenance, timber windows just need, after 10, 15 years, the paint will start to fade. At that point, a light sand, touch of paint, and it'll look brand new again. You can change the colour at that point if you want as well. So as fashions change, if the house is passed down to family or sold, someone new comes in, they can repaint the windows. Aluminium clad timber windows, another good solution. Again, aluminium will probably last longer in terms of the colour fastness, but when it does start to go, it'll fade, and then painting aluminium can be done, but I think getting that key is a bit more difficult. And if you damage aluminium and you have to repair it, if it's a bit of light repair, it can be done. Anything significant would need to be replaced. And if your window's lasted 10, 15 years, trying to get the aluminium profile in 10 to 15 years that matches the one you had before, it's probably going to be unlikely. Whereas if you damage timber, it can just be filled and repainted, and again, it'll look brand new. So for me, there's a lot of good things about timber. And I think when it comes to maintenance, there's this myth of maintenance free, which again is sold by a lot of the different companies to us. But I just kind of feel that everything that moves needs maintenance. You know, compare it to anything in your house, and you're going to need to maintain things. And why are windows and doors any different? People spend lots of money on a kitchen or a car, and you'll get it repaired, you'll get it cleaned, you'll get it serviced. Spend £10,000 on a sliding door, and you'll just leave it and expect it to be fine. So I think thinking of things like that, I think comparing it to a boiler, you spend £1,000 to £2,000 on a boiler and get it serviced every year. But again, your windows that cost similar price per unit at times. And, you know, all it needs is a bit of oiling, cleaning the gaskets, checking there's no dirt or anything in the tracks or the base of the window. It can make them last way longer. And I think another key thing, especially on self-built or new builds and deep retrofits, where there's lots of work going on, the most damage will probably happen in that first year of them being installed because there'll be other trades in and around. We often see horrible pictures a year after install, handovers happening. Oh, what can we do with this window? And it's just destroyed at the bottom because it's had tradesmen coming in with his toolbox, dragging it over, dragging wires through, cables through. They've been left open in all weathers. And I think as a self builder or a site manager, I think people need to take responsibility and just ensure that people are looking after the products. A key thing that I see when I go to Lithuania, where our factory is, we go and visit there every couple of years, and we go to a few of their sites, and they're very different to the UK. It's quite refreshing. But one thing they do is they'll fit the windows and doors. They'll take the handles off the windows and doors, and they'll give the handles to the site manager or the client. And they'll say, we've fitted the windows, we've got videos of everything looking clean and working well. If you choose to put these back on, which obviously for certain doors you'll need to, it's up to you to either take them back off after you've brought something in through the big sliding door. But if we come back in a year's time, obviously there's going to be costs for fixing things. So I think, yeah, with maintenance, I think it's looking after them in the building period, because after that, a little bit of light maintenance will be absolutely fine.
I've just had a couple of questions come in as well. So are there any issues with replacing doors and windows at different points in time, say a year apart? Thinking of colour matching, perhaps.
Okay, colour matching, not really. We colour match and the paints last, they'll be the same in terms of the paints that we use. Obviously, if it's on an extreme location or elevation where it's getting lots of sun or lots of weather, that paint might have faded a little bit. But I think a couple of years, I don't think you're going to notice anything. So no, I don't see an issue there.
Good. And then following on from that as well, another question from the same person is, would you fit MVHR first or replace windows and doors without trickle vents?
Okay, you probably need to fit MVHR first, because if you were to fit the windows without the trickle vents, you might get in trouble with building control, or we'd get in trouble with Fencer if we were inspected. So it kind of depends on building control, which whether you know or not, if building control is a little bit different, and some of them would take a bit of logic to it. And as long as you've got an order perhaps placed for the windows or a deposit, then they might be all right. Or for the MVHR or vice versa. But I think it's more just being careful about building control. Obviously, in terms of if you do put triple glazed windows in without any ventilation, then your living conditions might become quite difficult. For a while, you might have poor air quality. So ideally, if you can do them alongside each other, but of course it depends on cost and budget. But I think balancing that with building control and just making sure you don't get in any trouble.
Okay, back to the questions that were asked before. My client's preference is a slimmer profile window. How come windows vary in profile so much?
Okay, yeah. I think with a lot of the slim windows, they're very good, but whether they can perform the same way as our windows do and high performance windows. So sort of key aspects of a high performance window is that it's airtight, it's weather tight, it's secure, and it can hold the hinges and the big weights of triple glazed windows. So a profile, we always use 2 compression seals in all our windows and doors, and a compression seal needs a rebate. So you kind of need 2 rebates, which is why our timber windows are roughly around 100mm profile, including the sash. And some windows are a bit slimmer. A few years ago, we designed a window that was a bit slimmer, and we took our sort of usual 66mm frame down to 50mm. And we passed all the security tests and we thought, this is great. And then the guys actually started fitting it on site, our fitting team, and straight away they were saying, these windows aren't right, they're too thin. The joints are cracking when we're wedging them into position. On a big window, you've got a long sort of jam down the side, and we're using foam while we're packing the windows. That rail is bending because there's not enough strength there. And what we realised is that in the actual testing, to get it into the test rig, you have to fix a timber batten all the way around the window, which is what the vices hold in the test rigs. So the window had kind of passed the tests, I suppose, because it had this extra bit of timber attached to it. In reality, when you fit in that window and you don't have that extra timber attached to it, sort of a 50mm profile rebated down to sort of 25mm actually becomes quite flimsy, and especially over a big window, over kind of, a metre, 2 metres, that's a thin bit of timber holding a lot of weight. And we basically took the guy's advice and we thickened the window back up to 66mm. Again, with slim windows, it's just checking that they're secure as well. If that timber's so thin, can you get a screw through the keep that's not going to come out the other side of the timber? Is that screw then big enough to actually hold the keep in if it was attacked with a crowbar? So I think, security, weather tightness, longevity of the frames, I think are all something that's key when it comes to frame profile. And I also think when it comes to low energy building and wrapping frames with insulation and different cladding materials coming onto frames, having a thicker profile actually allows for that. So if you've got a 25mm timber reveal board on the outside and your frame's so thin, that reveal board might be bigger than your frame. So straight away you've got a problem with potential clashing of the frame. With tilt and turn windows these days, inward opening windows, again, it's thinking about how that's going to meet with plasterboards and possibly internal blinds. Slim profiles don't always allow you enough room to get plasterboards on. If you've got floor to ceiling windows, tilt and turn, which is again getting quite popular, you've got to think about the plasterboard and the skirting board, which is a problem we've seen in the past where people haven't thought about that extra 15mm skirting board or something. That can cause a clash with the hinges or the frame itself. I think all these things kind of come in, but with the design of a window, we're always thinking about all these things. We've changed that design multiple times in the 20, 25 years we've been going. And we think that we've found the sweet spot between a slim frame and a functioning frame. I think it's just being careful. And one final thing is, again, our frames are flush. So they're flush on the outside and flush on the inside. The way that some people get away with a slimmer frame is to have a much deeper frame, which means it's then the sash and the frame aren't flush on the inside, which becomes like an aesthetic choice and whether you like that. But all our frames are flush inside and out. So if it's a 78mm window, it's 78 and that's all you've got to worry about with the install. A lot of windows end up being 100, 150mm just to get that extra strength through the depth rather than the width.
Good. We are down to our final 2 questions now. So if anybody does have a question, please do put it in the box or raise your hand. That would be great. Hopefully your questions have been answered already. I've got another question actually here just come in. I currently have several rooms with a pair of windows next to each other of the same dimensions. Thinking about U values, would you replace like for like or enlarge the opening for a single window?
Yeah, I think if you don't have any planning constraints and there's nothing to worry about in terms of matching the previous, I think changing the design's much better, as the slide still on the screen will show. So I think, yeah, changing it to a single opener if the size allows, or just simplifying it. Or if you've got 2 windows next to each other in the same room, have one fixed and one opening. Again, that fixed window will be about 40% cheaper. Yeah, I think it's always worth a discussion with your window supplier and see what they suggest. But yeah, definitely worth changing if you can.
Right. Next question. Is there a minimum size for a window for an
opening window? Yeah, there are minimum sizes, which is just the size to get the hardware in, basically. So whether you've got an outward opening window, you need a hinged top and bottom if it's a side hung window. So usually they're about 16-inch hinges. So you need the window to be about 400, 450mm in width. In height, again, it depends on the window type, but yeah, probably like about 600. So from memory, I think the smallest window we can do is about 450 by 600. What you have to think about with window sizes, especially in new build, is means of escape and building regulations. So quite often we get drawings sent through with windows in bedrooms that are just slightly too small. And I think that comes from maybe an old architectural sizes of kind of 600 for a window, 900 for a window, 900 for a door. Actually, 600 with a triple glazed window is often too small, and just that little bit bigger will be fine. So 650 for an escape window is usually fine. And the same issue with doors. To get Part M compliance of 775, you often need that door to be kind of a metre wide or a metre and 50, just to allow for the big frames holding all the hardware and stuff. So I think it's something to check, and something that we highlight regularly when we get drawings through. We'll just increase sizes of windows and let you know what we've done and why. So just to cover building regulations and make sure you can escape and make sure the house is wheelchair compliant.
Right, the final question. What are your thoughts on floor to ceiling windows?
Okay, I think floor to ceiling windows are great and quite popular, but I do think they come with a few issues, and issues that you can get around quite easily. I think so. I think with a floor to ceiling window, most people are picking them because they've got a nice view that they want to look out on. So they think, if I've got a floor to ceiling window, that's going to maximize that view. We've actually got a great window in our office, but it's actually a picture window. It's landscape rather than portrait. It's about 800 off the floor. It's about 1.5 meters wide. And we look out over a beautiful view here in Huddersfield over the Home Valley. That window in that design allows me to see the view, and it misses the whole of the car park where we've got loads of lorries and random cars parked in there. If that was floor to ceiling, I'd be seeing the car park as well as the beautiful view. So I'd always kind of promote landscape windows over portrait. Another good thing about that is your glass is above 800. So unless that window is really, really big, you don't need safety glass. You can create a window seat, which then you might want to think about safety glass. But if you do want to create a deep reveal on the inside, you could have a nice window seat that you can sit on. So creating a seat within the wall. And then I think the final thing is back to the very first slide that we shared, which is overheating. So floor to ceiling windows are much worse for overheating, because even if you have got overhanging roofs or you've tried to sort of minimize things with different shading devices, that floor to ceiling's going to get the heat kind of no matter what you do, unless it's a full-time blind or shutter. So I think it's thinking about what the reason is for designing that window, and if it's needed. And if it's for a view, could you spin that window 180 degrees and get a horizontal window rather than a vertical window? And that might give you the view that you want, reduce the cost, reduce the overheating risk, and still look really good.
I've just had a couple more questions come in. You have advice on the use of glazed in louver panels plus an inward opening panel for secure ventilation?
Yeah, we've done this a few times. We've done school projects. So we've done a few projects where they've basically had a fixed louver fitted to the outside of the window. So when the window's in tilt or even turn mode, it's secure. So I think it's fine for certain building types. If you imagine that was a bedroom in a self-build where you need to get escape or you need to have provision for means of escape, that would obviously cause a problem having a fixed louver there. So I think a different system would be better. But we see it a lot in commercial buildings where they'll have different fire strategies. They'll have sprinkler systems, so they're not relying on people jumping out of windows or climbing out of windows. But yeah, it's possible, and we do see it.
Right. The other question that's come in is, what is our maximum window size?
Okay, it seems to go up every time I get asked that question. We try and cap it at a sensible size based on people lifting it, and whether that's in the factory or on site. We try and cap it around sort of 2.5 meters squared, which is a kind of a fixed window, and it's kind of like that's one half of a sliding door. So if you had a sliding door, it'd be kind of 5 meters by 2.5 tall. We can go bigger than that, so we've been pricing some fixed windows that are bigger than that, but it's just thinking about how they're going to be handled in the factory, handled on site, and very worst case if something goes wrong. So if that window gets smashed either during the install or when you're living in it or during the construction phase, the cost and the difficulty to get a piece of glass like that back into the frame is very difficult. So I always sort of say to people, go and sort of measure that window and stand next to it and see if you think it's actually too big or it's bigger than what you need. We've got a sliding door in our workshop in our showroom, and it's 4 meters by 2.3. And quite often people have come with us and they've got a quote that's like 6 meter sliding door, and they stand next to that door and they say, "Oh, is this the same size as my quote?" And we say, "No, it's kind of 2/3." And they're absolutely dwarfed by this door. It's huge. So I think just getting an idea for that actual size and just how you're going to get that window and door in there. And also for security testing and weather testing, we kind of capped a little bit as to how high we can go over the opening window, because every year to meet the UK regs and exposure and wind and security, we have to test these windows. So we sort of test the biggest we can, and we keep having to get the test rig to get bigger. We keep pushing the test centre to allow us to test bigger things because people are wanting bigger items. But yeah, there's a line somewhere. I think anything can be made and anything can be fitted, but it's just thinking about how you do that.
Right, your questions have been answered that you sent in. So when they're able to watch this back, hopefully we've answered all the questions that need to. Thanks very much. You're very welcome.
The question that I've got, Nicola, I suppose if there's any architects or self-builders on here, I suppose as a window company, is there anything that we're not providing that you need? I think it's good to get feedback both ways. So, is there particular drawings or pictures or guidance that window suppliers are not giving to you that would help your job, help you give us what we need and give the client what they need? If anyone's got any thoughts on that, let's have a conversation or drop us a message afterwards. We're here to help. We want to make things easy for everyone. So if there's a particular drawing or image or anything that's needed to help you guys, then let us know.
We have another question in. What are the pros and cons of the aluminium clad frames?
Okay. I suppose the main one is carbon footprint and the manufacturing of the aluminium against timber. So again, we always promote timber as an environmentally conscious company, but aluminium's getting specified a lot more for the maintenance side, which again, it's just being careful that you're not being kind of misled with the maintenance free, because everything needs maintenance. But yeah, aluminium is less, I suppose, than most things. Cost-wise, if you're starting with a timber window and then you get an aluminium-clad timber window or a composite window, chances are it's going to be a bit more expensive. And actually, that cost uplift would probably pay for at least the first round of painting in 10, 15 years of a timber window. But yeah, I think the main downsides with aluminium is that if you do damage it, you might need to replace the aluminium. If you damage it in the future, when windows have been updated, you might not be able to get that profile of cladding anymore, which might be a big issue. So yeah, I think that's the main cons. But pros wise, they do look, they've got a nice finish on them. They look good, but to me, they're no better than timber.
Thanks, Luke. Oh, another one's come in. I had a quote in the past and I had to complete the Excel quote for myself. As an end customer, this was not ideal. Do you now offer site visits for quotes since you introduced your own installer team?
Right. Okay. I mean, we've always had an installation team, so it might just be messaging. In terms of coming out to site to quote, we work nationwide. So coming out to someone's house to measure up to get a quote would just be, all our staff would be doing that and no one would be doing anything else. So we still don't offer that. The Excel form that we sent out, we've had mixed feedback on that. Some people think it's great. Some people think it's way too complicated. You can send us the information any way you want. If you wanted to do a pencil sketch with squares and sizes on them, that is absolutely fine. Send us some pictures and somehow label the windows 1 to 20 or 1 to 10, whatever you've got, and give us a size. We get things sent through in many different ways, and I totally appreciate that a kind of scary looking Excel sheet can be off-putting. But as a company working nationwide, we just can't come to site to measure unless you've already had a price, because if that price is way out of your ballpark, then we've spent a lot of time and effort and we've wasted both of our times, and we just don't have the capacity to do that. And as far as I know, not many window companies would do that unless it's a local company to you who, perhaps already giving you an idea of price. But yeah, if you want to have a conversation about that, quite happily, take a call after this.
Right, thanks. Do you just want to kind of go on to the final slide, Luke, just so that your details are there for anybody that wants to get in contact?
Yeah, so just drop us a message if you've got any more questions, or that's the main office line here in the Windows office. So you can speak to me or one of my colleagues in the estimating department if you've got further questions. And yeah, I was looking for collaboration with architects and anything we can do to help simplify processes for either side. And obviously self-build's our main market, so working with self-builders to answer their questions, and equally replacement windows, putting triple glazing into existing buildings is again a big part of our work. So, improving thermal performance of buildings, whether it's a standard existing house or it's a self-build.
Thanks everybody for joining. Much appreciated. Hope that you've found it useful. Hope that your questions have been answered. Luke said if you've got any questions, please do get in contact and we'll help out. And if you've got any feedback as well for us just on this style of webinar, then that would be amazing. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Okay, thank you, everyone.